quite a few people register, so hopefully maybe they're just trying to get home from work to get on. So my name is Stacy Purslow. I coordinate the New Hampshire Farm to School program, and this is Seed Saving in School Gardens. It's a part of the New Hampshire Farm to School Network and the New Hampshire School and Youth Garden Network 2022 webinar series. We've got a couple more coming up, I think two more, one on Thursday on composting, and then one in a few weeks on the Indigenous New Hampshire Collaborative Collective Educational Resources. So we have two presenters tonight who are going to talk about seed saving in school gardens. If you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, tell us where you're from, any connections to school and youth gardens, that would be great. And I'm going to now hand it off to Erik.
Thank you, Stacy. Thanks for joining us, everyone, tonight. This is going to be fun. We're going to open up just a very short presentation here, and then we'll get into it. All right, well, if you don't know me, my name is Erik Wochholz. I direct the horticulture program at Strawberry Bank Museum here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And we do many things, but we certainly focus on 4+ centuries of early American history. And the horticulture department focuses on a lot of that agricultural history, including sustaining resources, which is all about sustaining seed to sustain our garden designs and certainly support programs from children's programs all the way up to adult programs. It's a lot of fun. This is actually Goodwin Garden. If you're not familiar, I'll talk a little bit about our flower program that certainly our seed production supports. So this Victorian garden is predominantly a design with 19th century flowers. There are some herbs, but many of them perennial over many years. Now, we treat our seed program. There's actually two kind of connections at Strawberry Bank. Our Maine seed program, which sustains, again, our garden designs and certainly programs in our free seed programs for the community. But we also have started a community-wide network called the Piscataqua Seed Project. Now, this allows us to produce even more. So one of my suggestions for anyone learning the process of seed programs is to find opportunities for unique partnerships, because it's often difficult to grow everything that might support a program, along with trading and bartering within your local farmers markets, colleagues. So we've done quite a bit of that with similar organizations with similar missions, and this has allowed us to produce even more exponential amounts of diversity and seed for the community, as opposed to focusing all our production on site at Strawberry Bank. I'm going to go through a few of these kind of themes and protocols and methodologies, and we can certainly get into more conversations through our Q&A at the end. So I'm going to talk about goals and opportunities, challenges, certainly with nutrition. Sometimes people are a little bit intimidated about soil science. So you do want to often test your soil, or at least have that general idea of your soil quality before starting a program. Certainly if there's bad quality in the soil, that same quality will be in our food systems and certainly in our seed. I'll talk a little bit about design and seed production, specifically materials and saving cost, which is huge just to be sustainable. Again, reducing costs with more seed production, successive cycles, which basically means planting multiple varieties successfully, almost 2 weeks apart, to get as much food and seed out of your program as possible when you have the time and labor. And then certainly those methodologies around harvest, seed storage, and quality, which is important for the next season. This is, again, Goodwin Garden. You can see this is the other side from that fountain perspective on the previous slide. And you notice quite a bit of annuals with our perennials mostly on the outskirts of this design. Traditionally, many people were even displaying veggies and collecting seed beyond the flowers, like tomatoes and other types of display plants. that were both for ornamental purposes and for seed production and food systems. So what are the goals? So I often think every season as we change our programs, maybe we want to teach about herbalism, maybe we want to teach about pollinators and those interactions ecologically with bees and other types of insects and bugs. So we often will design not only our gardens in this way, but we'll think long-term about how these certain plants will reflect these types of themes. So this year, for instance, we may grow peppers and talk about, the medicinal qualities of spicy things like peppers and other things. If not talking about particular pollinators in our orchards, but growing things for that purpose. So just kind of thinking about your theme before you're designing or even selecting your seed varieties. A lot of people dive in, they want to do it all. I wouldn't recommend that. I would start pretty slow. Select a few varieties, particular to your themes and lesson plans. But often when we try to do too much, it becomes very overwhelming very quickly. Are you planting in your native soil? Are you planting in raised beds? Do you have limited space? Maybe you want to plant in container gardens. Maybe you have small containers, large containers that are static, if not smaller containers that you can move around. So is there versatility in your design? These are things to think about. Saving space is important, especially if you have limited square footage. So not only in-ground or planter plantings, but think about trellising and vertical farming for cucumbers to melons sometimes, beans and peas, things that will save you space within that limited square footage. Location is everything for plants, the right plant for the right place, as our growers often say. But many things will grow in shaded areas. So do consider turnips and radishes and all sorts of things that can grow in shade if you have limited light. Environmental concerns, certainly just controlling those variables if you can, but certainly more difficult outside with our environment here in New England, depending on where you're growing. Pest management and fertility. Again, these are important things. I don't want to get too much into the science today. You're welcome to ask me questions at the end. Water management is very important. That's probably the most, that's probably the one variable you want to control above all when growing seed and just plants in general, and certainly time management. So different methods that'll save you time while growing quite a bit of resources to support your programs. This is Rutgers tomato on the right. One thing I wanted to mention early on is we try to grow only particular varieties each year because many of our varieties will cross otherwise. So if you're growing just for seed and food, often you don't have to worry about it, but we try to sustain certain varieties by selecting, let's say, one tomato in one area versus 4 different tomatoes next to each other. So we'll often plant these varieties like tomatoes and melons and other things that will cross, sometimes miraculously producing very special stuff. But part of our program is to sustain these heirlooms. So when I give you a Rutgers tomato, I want to make sure we're giving away those cool old heirlooms. Meanwhile, we do play around with some hybrids, but we're also just trying to sustain that heritage, those heritage breeds. Sourcing seed is very important when you're starting a program. We use local vendors, certainly keeping in mind that these local vendors like Johnny's and High Mowing in Vermont, sometimes certainly using Midwest growers, but we try to grow out the seed that was grown here in our environment, certainly utilizing our native soils. I can get really nerdy, but a lot of microorganisms that are in our New England soils literally end up in the seed that we produce. Planting that again keeps it going. And those are kind of the same microorganisms that help us within our microbiome of our gut. So it's very interesting stuff. So we try to buy locally. Even our bees, we've been working more and more to get more locally sourced bees, because those bees from the South are often not environmentally tolerant, just the same with sourcing plants. Fruits and veggies, flowers, pollinator plants, herbs. There's so many things that can support student programs. So again, to focus a little bit, It's hard to do it all. And certainly if you have limited space, it's hard to do perennials. There are exceptions with smaller, less vigorous types of plants, but again, trying to focus. Draw it out. So every year when we're doing our designs, if not thinking about our programs, we're just drawing things out from the way people access these programs. It could be physical accessibility or online accessibility. Are we recording our programs? Are we posting pictures about our programs? We're teaching on site, but we're really trying to be more versatile when it comes to the accessibility of not just the resources that we're growing, but teaching the community and students all about those resources. So we do concentrate on a lot of those pathways into the gardens, if not whether we're running a program or the public is just walking around. I'm not sure if there are options like that within community garden spaces as opposed to schools, but we do try to access the resources as much as we can in that way during programs and not during programs, certainly thinking about accessibility online as well for education. Annual and perennial production, I often separate those two. I would suggest planting them both. Your perennials will significantly help grow annuals, providing more diversity and more nutrition to your soils. So that is part of the whole program as well, producing as many of those healthy seeds as possible. So this is Pharrella, pardon me, I keep forgetting the pictures. So I hope everyone's familiar with this beautiful plant on the right. This is Foxglove or digitalis. There's purpurea species in there and a couple others. We do grow flowers to support programs. And while we certainly relate more commonly to food crops, flowers are really aspects of supporting those different themes around pollinators, different bugs that might visit. So it really enhances the programs beyond our foodways culinary programs. So again, diversifying not only the design of the landscape, but the diversity of our subject matter. So we grow this quite a bit. This is a biennial. So if those who are not familiar with biennial production, that's the second year that you'll get seed. So often these plants are vegetative the first year. So what you see on the right is the second year of foxglove. After the flowering, they produce very, very small seeds. And just thousands and thousands of seeds off just a couple plants. I'll often mention exponential seed production. Heirlooms are very unique in that, in fact, that you can put a few in and you get thousands back, more and more seed in these open pollinated aspects of seed production. This is painted trout lettuce. Now, I often suggest when you're starting a seed program, especially with students just learning the process, lettuce is often the easiest to start with because you get food and seed very quickly. And this becomes part of that succession philosophy, planting, let's say, lettuce every 2 weeks. Boom, boom, boom. You're getting food every couple weeks. You're getting seed every, let's say, 4 weeks. Depending on the variety, they're very quick cycles. So we often will plant multiple varieties pretty close, if not in some distance, but we're really getting quite a bit of seed out of our lettuce varieties almost immediately in the middle of summer. And then we will have that same variety flush out, flower, and give us seed a second time in the fall. So that's just 2 cycles. You can really tighten that up if you'd like to get all sorts of cycles out of lettuce. This is a good one, and it is available at Strawberry Bank for free if anyone's interested. But you can easily source this one amongst many other lettuces that are really easy to start a seed program with. Think about your soil amendments, whether you're mulching or using cover crops. Most people are focused on controlling weeds. Again, you want to get your labor down and try to manage the weeds as much as possible, certainly for your programs. If not, try to embrace some of that ecology and teach your students why the weeds are coming in, why it's important to manage them. If not, the beneficial aspects of some types of plants that we call weeds. I don't really like that term. It's just kind of subjective. Producing more, buying less. This certainly is part of that exponential aspect of planting multiple times in one season. Here in New England, depending on where you are, but here in New England, our season is very tight. So we try to fit as many cycles as possible within our programs. And this gives us a lot of seed for our programs to teach people all about these cool aspects of plants. And it just sustains resources more, so you don't have to buy as much every spring. So getting down your costs in that way is huge. And it'll really teach kind of those mathematical aspects of farming, which are just those basics that teach us how to be more sustainable. And this is really practical, I think, for young learners to know that part of gardening and farming. Trellising, again, saving space. Upcycling. I hope everyone's familiar with that term, upcycling, as opposed to recycling. Upcycling, let's say I eat a dozen eggs and I then sow seed in that egg carton, or I go get a coffee and I mistakenly didn't grab my metal coffee tin and they give me plastic. I plant maybe 3 cycles of melons in that cup. So do consider like aspects of teaching how to upcycle or recycle materials with students and learners. It's very fun to kind of plant in really anything and experiment in that way, whether we're growing in a cup or a wheelbarrow. Lots of people experimenting with just planting in all sorts of different things these days. A larger aspect of these types of programs is certainly experimenting early with LED lights and indoor growing, if not cold frames, which basically transitions your indoor plants to your outdoor environment. So you have that transition of environment. But I don't want to get too much into the innovation of horticulture, but do consider how to grow plants early on to bring that first cycle out. Let's say with the kingflower on already when it comes to cucurbits and all sorts of other things. For instance, right now I've got melons and pumpkins going for that first cycle to come out by June 1. So just consider those early cycles, which will give you seed and food very early on in our short season here. Growing mother plants, do consider propagation as well, especially to reduce cost. Maybe you're growing geraniums or tomatoes, and you can certainly take cuttings to produce more and more of those same plants to produce more seed. Totopotency is just a fancy word of the potential of plants to produce more and more, from cell structure to producing seed. Again, I'm not going to get into too much of the science, but my point being, there are methods to actually reproduce more and more to save costs when supporting these programs. So just consider that. Open pollination, I mentioned that briefly. As opposed to hybrids, open pollination is really open genetics, so we really focus on old heirlooms. This is Noir de Carme to the right. If you've never experimented with this melon, it is awesome. It's an old 18th century melon, and we are actually growing it currently for that June 1 planting cycle. So do try melons and all sorts of things, but it does create a little bit of a space requirements, a lot of the melons, but this one does not need a lot of space, and I always suggest to experiment with this one. Start seed lines healthy. Again, that's all about sourcing. But once you have your own seed system, let's say you grow out tomatoes, planting the same seed that you harvested, once you get that, will certainly cycle out those healthy lines that you produced with your students and yourself. So once that gets going, you'll notice quite a bit of health if it's a healthy line that you produced out of your own production. This is a typical cycle. I wanted to go through this to kind of give you an idea on what the potential is when it comes to early plantings. Not only consider with your students growing out transplants in a pot, but certainly save a lot of time by directly sowing into the soil. You know, if you've got good planting beds, you can be planting live plants and putting seed at the same time for those different cycles. And it'll teach your students and certainly develop that program to be more versatile around different methods of producing seed and plants. So we often kind of have that balance between bringing transplants into our programs and planting those out, growing those out for seed, but also saving quite a bit of time by just putting seed directly in our soils. And again, at the bottom here, just a reminder, biennials is that second year. And a few examples are beets and kale, but just making sure you know the difference. This is coriander on the right, or cilantro. This is a finicky plant, but very fun, certainly with students and adults. We often will grow this, particular to teaching about herbalism and phytochemicals, really just all the things that keep us healthy. And we often will match up a lot of these plants with pickling programs. Preserving food is just a tremendous part of history. And I love this aspect of programming when we're not only growing plants to eat, but we're teaching students about how these plants will extend shelf life and keep us healthy. But certainly the aspect of plants spoiling or food spoiling and how we resist that with certain chemicals that plants naturally produce. Very, very cool stuff. Quality assurance is all about the variables, moisture being one of them. After we harvest at the end of the season, looking for the driest seed, the more mature seed, and even that seed that seems to be a little bit more vigorous coming out, including the plant. We'll put most of our seeds into paper bags that are open or mason jars. But you always want to really keep things open because things easily mold. Even when you think all the water is out, it really isn't. So we kind of keep our bags and jars open for a period of time before we seal them. And even after we seal our jars or containers, you can really use anything. You kind of want to burp that every now and then, or just simply check it, because the mold or critters, often bugs and insects coming in with your harvest, will certainly decimate quite a bit. I've checked seed over a couple months, and quite a bit of insects will get in. So just double checking for that quality insurance. Some people actually put them in the freezer for a couple days, just kind of shock or kill bugs and insects that have come in with your harvest. But unless you have a really nice kind of sub-zero freezer, I would not suggest doing that long term. It would break and kind of kill your seed sometimes. So drying and curing, just like fruit, sometimes we'll lay seed out flat in the sun, but again, don't subject your sun to the environmental factors too much. So heat, temperature, so to dry it out a little bit, but bring it almost immediately inside for more of that cool, dark environment. So once things are in packaging right after harvest, we try to keep them cool and dry above all. Labeling, certainly at harvest, keep track of your varieties, especially if you're growing multiple varieties. Let's say tomato, make sure you're keeping track of what's what. You can easily mix things up if they're the same plant. And sometimes germination testing is cool before your program schedule. So is your seed viable? It's really tough to wait too long right before you want to start your program and the seed isn't viable. So just kind of test, let's say 10 seeds. If 2 come up, that's 20%. But above all, the more you can germinate, the better the test is. So that's a bit of that experiment, making sure we have viable seed to run our programs in the spring all the way to the fall. I'm going to quickly go through our gardens at Strawberry Bank, some of the themes. This is our colonial garden. On the right, we see calendula, we see Orac lettuce, that's that tall red lettuce. We see some elecampane against the fence. And do think of this type of design. This is actually a raised bed design with fencing around it. You can barely see the raised beds. And this is what I talk to diversity. Growing quite a bit of multiple varieties, especially flowers with your food crops, will bring in quite a bit more pollinators, and you will notice more seed set because of this kind of ecological approach. So we bring in pollinators, we have more fruit set, more seed production because of it. So along the years, I've really noticed the diversity really does help promote that ecological aspect of pollinators and food crops. So do embrace that diversity. This is Goodwin Garden. This is a different design from a different year. Every year is different. And again, planting flowers with some food crops, but most of this is flower design. Do consider programs all around flowers, maybe flower parts or pollinator interactions. There are many flowers like zinnia that we produce seed every year, very easy. If not, celosia and a couple other things. Many flowers, poppies, and other things. But again, most of this is perennial. So once you establish it, keeps going and going, if not producing seed for programs and continuing that process. This is the original map on the right side that we've reproduced year after year, just trying to focus on what they would have done in the 19th century, which was all about seed collecting, propagating, and certainly that important sustainability around new markets, around nurseries and horticulture. The most exciting part of my job is one of many, talking about the Victory Garden. This is where we produce most of our seed. And we change this design up every year a little bit, but we are certainly growing a lot of cabbage and kale in here, beans and peas, tomatoes, rhubarb, arugula, many flowers that also bring in the pollinators. We have elderberry, so we do grow perennials that do yield fruit and edible flowers. Nasturtium, that we sometimes pickle the seeds, not only growing the seed, but pickling the seed. They're commonly called mock capers traditionally. So again, that diversity, this is actually where our chickens are. So do think about maybe a compost program in complementary to your seed program. You know, sustaining that nutrition, reducing your fertilizer needs, and just thinking about that diversity, not only in your design, but your soils. Compost programs are great, and it certainly reduces fertilizer needs. This is Sweet Cicely on the left. It is a licorice type plant. It is a very, very good plant in salads. It does bring in native pollinators, and this is collard green, bottom left. This is another perspective. This is the map, one of the maps. We do grow in straight lines as they would have done with types of tools. So do consider certain tools that you can use, but you don't often have to plant in straight lines. It's not really practical when it comes to square footage sometimes, but we do try to reproduce those styles. Sorry, it's not the best map, but we can see some leek in here, dill, painted trout, lettuce, the beets. We do two types of potato usually, Norland and Kennebec. Kale, Danvers carrot. We used to grow quite a bit of strawberries in this space, and we plant perennials on the outside of the vegetable design to certainly bring in those pollinators. Cucumbers, really easy. Beets, again, kale at the top. Do consider these fast cycle crops, and certainly those things that you can just direct sow, saving time, like the cucumbers and beets, which we often direct sow, if not bringing small transplants, but mostly direct sow for those two. Be really quick. Flower design, again, this is Thomas Bailey Aldridge, really quick. We do collect daisies and poppy seeds, if not a couple others from this space. If you haven't seen this in spring, this is one of the most beautiful gardens in the spring. It looks like this almost every year. We change it a bit. We've got hops and other things. And again, try to establish some perennials with your programs as well. So you're getting really early color and certainly reducing that labor long term. Greenhouse, we propagate and grow quite a bit of seed sometimes in here, but mostly just using it as a program production area where we're bringing out a lot of our display plants, but do also consider that early aspect of growing plants in warmer temperatures under lights, or just bringing those transplants out pretty early with these structures. This is really a cold frame, which is running plants at colder temperatures. The smear method, this is part of our programs. I always want to just mention this. Smearing seed on paper is one of the easiest things you can do with sticky fruit, like tomatoes, cucumbers, melons, peppers, very dry inside, does not work. The seed will not stick, it'll just fall off the paper. So particular varieties work. We label these papers often with students and adults, where we're just collecting, dating, and putting the variety with just a marker. We stack these, store them, and we're good to go the following year. Old seed packet on the right, this is actually an old seed packet of a red cranberry bean. We grow quite a bit of beans, one easy thing to do, especially with direct sow. And again, this is part of that trellising philosophy with many crops saving space. Hubbards, this is one of the melons we're growing out right now. This is, so that is Blue Hubbard in the center there and Marrow on the left. Really awesome. And again, the diversity of the colonial garden. This is a bit of a different design on the right with Scarlet Runner Bean, which is a great one to sustain for programs. Really pretty, edible, and very unique seed. So even the colors of seed, sometimes we'll design programs and crafts with. I try not to use glue in craft, but sometimes we'll make that exception. But different craft aspects, whether like old style necklaces or certainly just designing certain things with very colorful beans as if they're jewelry. The kids love it. And that's about it for me. This is another perspective many years ago of Goodwin Garden. This is wisteria and a couple other things. That's my email on the bottom. Feel free to contact me with questions about our programs. And I just wanted to mention our Heritage Breed Animal Exhibit is coming up April 23rd, where there will be free seed if anyone's interested, along with cute baby animals.
Thank you, Eric. We're going to take some questions at the end. But if you have any questions for Erik, just put them in the chat and we'll get to them. And next up is Neil Lash. He's going to talk about the high school seed saving program that he's been running for a while up in Maine. Erik, okay.
There we go. Thank you. Welcome. I'm glad that you all joined with us. I am the co-founder and current director of our Heirloom Seed Project at Medomak High School in Waldoboro, Maine, Mid-Coast, Maine. We started the program in 1991, and it's a science elective available as an elective to grades 9 through 12. And it's a year-long course for 1 credit. I know we have a limited size, so I want to make sure I get into specifics of the program and try to get some of your seed-saving information out to you as best I can. First of all, I limited the first part of this to curriculum ideas, particularly what I found grades 2 through 6. So if you're involved with students grade 2 through 6, I might recommend that you use this PDF downloadable book, 94 pages. It's called A Handful of Seeds, and I believe you have the hyperlink to that, but beautifully done, both artistically and informationally for education purposes. The name of the book, as I said, is A Handful of Seeds, Seed Saving and Seed Study for Educators. Lessons are linked to the California standards, since Occidental is in the San Francisco area, but it's through Occidental Arts and Ecology Center. They have practical information on seed saving for school gardens, history and lore and so forth. And one of the things I'd like to do just briefly is to read down through their contents so you'll see if it's applicable to you, to the content that applies to you. First of all, I have a chapter on why save seeds in a school garden, what are seeds, the botany of seeds, seed saving basics and starting procedures, stories about certain seeds, which is a major part of our program, seed saving lessons and links to the standards, and they give you some standalone lessons that you can use in your classroom or with the younger students. More seed saving curriculum and ideas for older and advanced students, and then the historical context of seeds and seed saving, and then background information for teachers. And again, this one here, which I've now bound, is available online, and all you have to do is go to their website, which you see in back of me, and also that you have, but make sure when you go to OAEC.org that you include a handful of seeds. Other than that, you'll take them into their main menu and you'll have a real hard time of finding this book. And if you go to it, type in that and plus add a handful of seeds, and you'll have it readily available. Just download it, print it up in color. And like I said, it's artistically, beautifully done. And it's got a lot of information in there that I don't want to go over at this point. What I want to do is to show you our book, which is called The Seed Garden. This is our classroom textbook, and it's also a major reference. And in here, there are ideas that possibly in a half hour, neither of us could cover as extensively as done. But I would like to read their content and explain to you a little bit from there what we do specifically as it relates to seed saving. First of all, the art and practice of seed saving. They go through the botany and a whole chapter on the botany of seed saving, mating systems and how they pollinate. You'll have to know if you're going to do this and you want to save seeds true to type, you're going to have to make sure that they are protected if they're cross-pollinators from pollinating, or you have a problem if you don't isolate them far enough. So I'll get into that a little bit later. There are also how to stay true to your variety, seed saving and variety maintenance. There's a chapter on cultivating for seeds, harvesting and cleaning seeds. We go through that quite thoroughly and have to offer our seeds that are well cleaned and well maintained. And I'll go through our drying methods in just a bit. And then seed quality and storage behind us. And maybe Ryan McNally, who co-teaches with me, is right here. Let me show you this just a sec. Okay, thank you. Okay, that is our walk-in freezer at 10 below zero. I'll explain to you why we need that. And it's filled with about 1,000 different historical varieties of seeds of eclectic mixes, from flowers to vegetables of all types. So it's all stored in there to make sure that we can keep them as viable as possible, because there's no possible way that we can get enough inventory if we have to grow them out every year, every other year. So we store them and at 10 below zero, dried properly. I'll get into that in just a sec. They will probably, and most of them, I think lettuce seeds, you might get 75 years out of them. And I think some seeds would stay viable for 500 years or more. So it's very important that you know how to make sure they don't cross-pollinate. So I'm going to show you how we do that. Our seed gardens are not nearly as cosmetic as Strawberry Banks. And we extensively have to grow as in a limited school space. So we have 33 4x10 raised beds. And we also have them about handicap accessibility distance apart. So it's quite important. We are growing seeds close to each other that they can't cross and don't cross. And we do rigorous protocol to make sure it doesn't happen. And I'll spend some time on that as soon as I go through this book. And then the last thing is on how to plan your seed garden, how to choose the varieties and so forth. That would be good for New England and good for us. Then there's a whole section, the last section is on whether each vegetable crop, and this is exclusively in vegetables, each vegetable crop is a cross-pollinator or a self-pollinator, and how strongly they cross-pollinate and how well they self-pollinate, because each one of them has specific isolation distances. If you're growing, for example, Erik grows only one type of variety. We grow probably 6 types of variety of tomatoes on alternating seed beds, but we have to make sure that they don't cross-pollinate, because our program is internationally recognized for, number one, It's heritage seeds, our heirloom seeds, and we concentrate everything on heirloom seeds. We have seeds that are sent, as I said, all over the world to different living history museums and also for research purposes. So we must maintain that biodiversity. And so we've sent seeds to several different places in Canada, University of Guelph. We've shared with at least a couple of other universities that are using these seeds for research purposes. So we have to maintain their genetics true to type because that's part of what they're doing. So all the charts, everything here, it's a beautiful book, $29.95. If you're into advanced or just starting seed saving, this is probably your best source. It's through Seed Savers Exchange in Decorah, Iowa. We've been a member of Seed Savers since 1991. We first started, and I'll give you a little history on what got us started into historical seed saving, only historical seeds. I was watching a Victory Garden in 1990 when the founder of Seed Savers Exchange, Kent Whaley, was on, and he was taking a walk through the Heritage Farm in Decorah, Iowa, and said, I am holding a seed now, which came from the Mayflower, and it's called Mayflower bean. And I said to the other person who was teaching with me at the time, we need to get history involved if we're going to do seed saving. So everything we've done since that day forward is all about different types of crops and how to seed save, how to grow them. But they have to be, our criteria is to get them, they have to be associated with some very poignant or very powerful seed saving story from the history of the past. Just last week, we planted our, in the greenhouse, our lumper potatoes, which is the potato, which is so connected to monoculture in Ireland in the 1840s. And when the blight hit Ireland, it obviously, you probably know the history of Ireland and what happened in transforming the whole history of the world based upon that one susceptibility of that one potato to be susceptible to the blight. They had only grown that one type because the poor farmers were growing most of their crops to sell to Britain. And as a result, they were only able to grow their own food on limited space. And that would be limited to potato, which was one of the only crops in the world where you could actually sustain your diet on strictly potatoes. And so they ate nothing but potatoes, mostly in those small buildings that they lived in. And when the blight struck, it wiped them all out. And the story, 1 million starved, 1 million came to the United States. And here's where the lumper also segues into me. My wife's great-grandfather came from Dunman Way in County Cork Island, which was the probably one of the counties most struck by the blight, came to America, landed on what is present day Strawberry Banks neighbor, which is the Prescott Gardens, and landed there when it was a series of wharfs, and from there moved to Massachusetts. And my wife is his great granddaughter. So we try to get as much connection to our seeds historically as possible to our students. And so we have to, because they are so susceptible to the blight, we have to grow them in a greenhouse. We have 2 heated greenhouses for our production. We have a 100-foot greenhouse and a 60-foot greenhouse. The 60-foot greenhouse later on this spring will be exclusively for our heirloom seeds. And what we do is we do a plant sale to maintain the ongoing cost of all of this through a seed sale. And I don't know, we probably sell probably $10,000 worth of seeds of plants to the public when it's open in April. But anyway, that's a little bit about our program. I want to get into more specifics now. Also, as a member of Seed Savers Exchange, they've kept tabs of the numbers of people around the world who've contributed through the years to their seed saving movement. And we, at the present time, historically, going back to the time Seed Savers started, we rank number 3, I believe, in numbers of seeds that we've made available through their catalog, which is called the Exchange Catalog. And this is full of seeds. And what we do is we go through here and highlight. I read this thing basically cover to cover, and then we highlight seeds which are particularly associated with history. We have our students write full block business letters to the people involved in who has them. For example, this year we sent for a Seneca Flint corn that was available to us from a farmer in Nebraska, and we send for them and we get them, and then we have to grow them out, and then we make them available as well. This year, I think we have 95 of our seeds that are available to Seed Savers Exchange Network members, and then we go from there. This walk-in cooler that we got, we always, because if you're involved in school gardens, you know the funding is a major issue. So we're always looking for grant sources. And that was through the Seeds of Change. And we, in 2015, won a national contest for the reason why the money would be important to maintaining our seed program. And we won the college and high school division $20,000 grant, which was just enough to purchase and hook up our walk-in cooler. And like I said, it's 10 below zero. You don't want to stay in there for long, but it maintains viability. That's not a problem. For you at home, if you're going to save seeds, probably the freezer would be the best place for you to keep them. And that will keep them a lot longer than you would if you just left them out. But never, ever save seeds in a high moisture part of any building. A lot of people, probably it's in the kitchen. And when you start to cook and boil, that is a disaster for seeds. They need as dry as you can get them, and basically as cold as you can get them. To make sure before our seeds go in the freezer, we can freeze them if they're still moist, but they're going to turn, as Erik said, we're going to turn to mush, and they're going to kill them. So they must be dry. So what we do is we have a series of fluorescent lights. We keep them under fluorescent lights where the ambient relative humidity is quite low. You want to make sure that you're not putting your seeds in a jar and saving them on a drizzly, rainy, high humidity day, because those seeds can soak up the moisture in hours. So what you want to do is to keep them dry, and then on a real dry, relative humidity-wise day, that's the time you put them in a jar. And when you put them in a jar, what we do is each one of them goes with a piece of cobalt chloride indicator. And this is an indicator of the relative humidity. I'll show you how sensitive it is. Let me just touch it with my tongue. Notice, I think you can see, it's quite blue. What? Instantly pink. And that picked up the moisture. So what we do is before we put them in the freezer, we put one of these in our seeds, let them stay for probably 3 or 4 weeks outside, but still capped and closed. And if they start to change in any way towards a pinker color, we will have to uncap them, go through the drying process until when you put them in, they maintain that humidity. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but that end is picking up the moisture on my fingers. So it's very, very sensitive, and it's called cobalt chloride. It's very inexpensive, and I think you can get it online. We also then maybe put a desiccant. You can get old packages of silica gel and put those in to further dry them down, and then cap them, and they go back in our seed collection. Because they're so cold, when you take them out, there's going to be a lot of humidity and condensation on the package, the jar. What you have to do is to make sure that you let it get to the ambient temperature of the room before you open it. So when we send our seeds out to wherever, this year we've sent them out to 16 different seeds and 2 places in Colombia, Mexico. Try it again. Canada. We want to make sure that everything is all set, and we don't want to then open up our seeds, let the humidity go back in, which we spent a lot of time making sure that the relative humidity was out, and then take out our sample size that people are requesting, and then cap them back and put them in and go through that process again and again. Cold, dry. Can't stress the need to keep them as cold as you can. If you can't put them in a freezer, then put them in your refrigerator. Even if you take them out of your refrigerator in a jar, let me go back a little bit. When we are saving them under the lights, the fluorescent lights, we have a huge bank in there of probably, I don't know, 60 or 70 different 4-foot fluorescent lights where we grow our plants out. We have to make sure that they're on towels or whatever, so that they are labeled and dated, and you have to keep accurate records. So you want to make sure you date them, make sure you certainly label what they are, and then when they're properly dry, then you take them out. We put them in an envelope for another month, still under the lights until they further dry, wrapped in a paper towel. And then after that, we put them in the jar, which has to be sealed tightly, and then put them in our refrigeration unit. That's that part. Now, how do we maintain our isolation distances? For example, when you're planting and growing tomatoes, it makes a difference what your species of tomatoes are. If they're regular leaf tomatoes, regular Pimpinella folium, you can probably get away for seed saving purposes 50 feet apart from other types. Because I'm involved in genetically saving them, then we're talking about 150 feet. If you're 100 feet minimal. If you're talking about potato leaf tomatoes or Pimpinella folium, the ancient tomatoes, they have a stigma which sticks out, and they tend to more readily cross-pollinate, although they're self-pollinators. And so we have to go about making sure we grow them protected. So what we do, and this is key to hopefully keeping them viable, we buy 10-foot length, 1/2-inch metal conduit. I got through Johnny's Seed Company a conduit bender, a seed bender, a metal bender, and we bend them like that, put them in our raised beds, and then cover them with an insect barrier. This insect barrier is from Johnny's, and it's called Protect Net. It's quite expensive. A much cheaper version of this, which is available, is a very low thickness Agribon or Rime, but make sure you get low thickness to cover them, because if you use the thicker ones that are also temperature sensitive, they'll tend to overheat in the summertime and you will cook your plants. So make sure it's also breathable, but make sure you rock it or somehow lock it down so that the insects can't get in. Insects get in, there goes your chance of maintaining the variety. We also have corn tassel bags, and we bag our corn. We have tassel corn tassel and the seed bags, and we bag those, even though they can cross probably in Maine, New Hampshire, corn varieties grown within 2-3 miles from each other still have the possibility of crossing. So to maintain the variety, we try to isolate the best we can, but we're in a corn producing part of the state, mid-coast, and there's a lot of corn, certainly closer than 3 miles. So we do also ensure that they are bagged, and then we hand pollinate. All of that directive is in there in this book. And as I said, the graphics in this book is probably as good than the contents itself. But I certainly, all of you should have the Seed Garden, the Art and Practice of Seed Saving from Seed Savers Exchange as part of your basic seed saving program. Like I said, we try to maintain true to type. And so if any of them under any conditions seem to be in any way different, we rogue them out and we make sure that they only are true to the type of seeds that we get.
Neil, can I interrupt?
So I can.
So we just have a few minutes left.
Okay.
And I didn't know if anybody had any questions. I know that he's got a lot of information. Certainly half an hour can't do his program justice, but he's offered some wonderful resources. But I wondered if anybody had any questions. So Trisha is asking, is the Seed Garden the update to seed saving from Seed Savers? That's a lot of seeds.
That is the one. The seed to seed, which we used to use, has been replaced by this one. This is the updated, much more graphically and graphic arts and so forth, much improved from the old seed to seed, which is a great source to begin with.
Any other questions?
I think Megan had a question for Erik earlier on. I don't know if Megan, you can unmute if you want to and ask your question.
Hi, don't mind the crowd I have. So I have a question for Erik about soil testing. At our children's garden, we actually do lasagna garden beds. So I don't know if you're familiar with that process or not, or if I should explain it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just don't know if you think that we should still get the soil tested, even though we're making our own soil.
Well, the native soil will certainly interact with whatever lasagna layer you'll put on top. So it's just something considered, but it's up to you. Sometimes soil tests are not very accurate. There's varieties of different testing. And, even if it's in the soil, doesn't mean it's actually in the plant in the same aspects of percentage wise, and it gets very complicated. But when it comes to certain standards, I mean, those are the standards that you establish, I would suggest, as opposed to farmers growing high value crops that are just so concerned with each of those variables. And the expense that many farmers large scale have. Testing can be very expensive for the home gardener, so it's not often practical. So it all depends on your own standards.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Sam would like to know, is it illegal to save any kinds of seeds?
There are seeds that are patented, so it all depends on your sourcing. So patented seeds, there's actually people that will walk through certain aspects of large scale garden centers. And if labeled plants are discovered that, let's say the owner is propagating, let's say petunia, that's patented, they will get a substantial fine. And that's why we often try to focus on open pollinated, more kind of wild genetics. A lot of companies are trying to own that too, through a lot of policy, unfortunately. But it's these types of networks and small communities that try to sustain these resources. We often call it seed sovereignty, but it is a little bit tricky when it comes to patented seed, which you can get into a lot of trouble. Yeah.
But how do you know which ones are patented? Like, how can you tell?
So patented seed are labeled as such, and often particular companies will have these types of standards when labeling whether their seed is patented. These is usually the large seed companies as opposed to small seed companies growing open pollinated heirlooms. Often some of these hybrids you cannot even grow true to type. So you'll often try to grow a lot of these patented hybrids, but it won't actually produce what you're looking for. So it becomes challenging even beyond the patent issue. So I would recommend going to more local heirloom producers that actually sustain that open pollinated philosophy. And those are usually those genetics that you can propagate out, and certainly not getting in trouble with patents. But a little investigation when it comes to the seed company is always advantageous, just to kind of investigate a little bit.
Cool. All right, thanks.
All right. So this presentation has been recorded. So if you want to view it again, you can find it on the New Hampshire Farm to School.org website. Hopefully you saved the links that were put in the chat to all of the great resources that were shared. And we'll also provide links to those resources on the New Hampshire Farm to School website along with the recording. So if you want to view it again or share it with anybody, feel free to do so. I want to thank Erik and Neil for their awesome presentations. A lot of good practical information to consider for your school and youth garden programs. And we hope to see you all soon at some of our other upcoming webinars. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful night.